Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Church at Fall River, Mass.
Welcome to this circle of friendship where we come with our questions, our cares, our joys and our sorrows, and our yearnings. Welcome to this house of the Spirit. This is our sacred ground. On this Martin Luther King Jr. birthday celebration weekend, let us light our chalice this morning in gratefulness for his life's work in racial and social justice, and also for peace in this hurting world, which will be forever grateful for the flame he lit in us and for us. Let us rise as you are willing and able and sing our first hymn, number 326, Let All the Beauty We Have Known. Let us say together our affirmation, printed in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. This is our time for announcements. Would anybody like to make an announcement?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you.
So a few years ago, you remember this particular sermon we did on this very same weekend about Greta King rather than Martin Luther King. It was a great sermon. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So thank you for being here today. And let's see, next week will be Barbara Mills. She's only been here a few times. So do come and make her feel comfortable, and we'll add her to the list. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day, and a full day of events here in Fall River, one of which will happen here at the Unitarian Church. But to give you the whole schedule, in case you're interested, at 8:30 till about 10, there's a free breakfast, full breakfast at Bristol Community College with speakers and music and student art. That's in the G building, which is all the way around the back. And so that starts the day at 8:30. And then at 11:30, Bethel AME Church, which is Fall River's Black Church, on the corner of Hanover Street and Maple Street, has a Martin Luther King service, so more traditional gospel kind of service. And they used to have a luncheon following it, but they stopped doing that a few years ago, just about the same time that we started having an evening event. So we have a potluck piecemeal, Martin Luther King Day piecemeal event here. The setup is at 5:30, and we at 6. We ask you to bring reflections and memories of how Dr. King may have affected your life. There will be music, fortunately provided by Jim, who is not today, but Jim usually leads us in some singing. I have a wonderful menu prepared. If any of you are coming and want to bring something, great, not necessary. But if you are bringing something, just let me know, just so I can include it in the menu. So I think tomorrow, in many ways, is an eventful, more typically milestone day in our lives. Parallel to some of the more significant events. Rarely have we had an inauguration day on the same day as a Martin Luther King Day. I think it was an opportunity to reflect and consider not just the day, but our future. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen.
This Friday, Dave and I will be at the Belmont Club, joined by Washed Up Jim. We'll be there from 6 to 9, so if you'd like to move over, we'll be there. Thanks.
So UIA, which this organization is involved with, met with the sheriff, and some plans are in the works. We may be asking for some moral support, I guess, from us. That the sheriff wants to close one of the Ash Street jail. He wants to make it a recovery, re-entry kind of house, which would alleviate some of the homelessness. Seems like a good idea, so we need political support, working back here. And I guess the other thing is, if anyone knows anyone who's really, sleeping outside, which is not going to be very nice tonight and tomorrow or the next few days, the First Baptist is having all-night prayer services for people to, come in out of the cold, sit down, have some coffee. They're gonna have meals, and you'll be able to stay there all night long. So, yeah, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday so far. So just in case anyone knows anyone.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I feel like I should be having a drink, however, when I hear this song, because you may not know this, but if you were a pub goer, if you went to the pub, and everyone did in England when I was growing up, we ended the night with "Who's Sorry Now?" It's great. The reading this morning is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 5, verses 11 through 32, the parable of the prodigal son, but I've reworded it into modern language. In ancient times, a rich man had two sons. The younger son said to his father, "Father, please give me now my part of the inheritance so that I can travel and experience the world." His father gave him the money. The younger son went to Egypt, which in those days was the well-known place for young people to go to have fun and to do ill. He wasted all his money living the high life, and he had to look for a job. The only job available to him was taking care of pigs, which was a great shame for a Jewish man, since pigs were considered unclean animals. He was so hungry that he was tempted to eat the swill the pigs were eating. He began to be remorseful about leaving home, where even the servants ate well. He realized what a fool he had been and determined to return home, hoping that his father would forgive him and accept him back into the household, even as a servant. He returned home in sorrow for his foolishness. His father's servants recognized the young man from a distance and said to his father, "Sir, your son has returned, and he is distressed." The father was overjoyed. He embraced and kissed his son and ordered the servants to prepare a great feast to celebrate the son's return. And he restored him as his son in his household. When the older son returned from work to see why the household was rejoicing, he seethed with resentment that his father had restored his wastrel of a brother when he was the responsible one. His father embraced him too and said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and everything of mine is yours. It was proper for us to celebrate your brother's return, for your brother was dead to us, but is alive again. He was lost and now is found. Let us be in a spirit of prayer and meditation. First, let us hold in your heart a person you know who is in need of your healing love. And also bring into your mind our dear Eric. May he feel our love, and may he heal and come back to us soon. Now let us have a sense of the oneness that is in and around us, and breathe into it, and have a sense of this people in this room as a people, your people, our people. And moving beyond those of us here today, we see a hurting world. In our American world, let us have a sense of our country and the challenges of winter weather across the nation. Let us especially hold in our hearts, the people in Southern California, where the Santa Ana winds have fanned the flame of destruction, leaving thousands without shelter. Let our love heal and comfort those grieved in losing their homes they loved for an unknown future. It is all so vast that we can only acknowledge the suffering and send love. May they be resourceful and receive help. And now into the silence, let us each speak the promptings of our own hearts, or just be. Amen. Let us sing the hymn, The Spirit of Life. The words are printed in your order of service, and we will remain sitting.
Rise
The topic of my sermon is forgiving and letting go. Has anyone hurt you such that you were left with resentment that haunted you for years? If not many, if not most of us, have experienced one or two incidents in our lives that caused us ongoing anger or resentment. There is a famous children's story in a book called What If Nobody Forgave? The story of Grudgeville. The name of that town, Grudgeville, caused me to smile at the memory of the grudge my own father carried to his grave. My mother told us that when I was 2 years old, they took me to visit Grandma, Nanny Fox, the other grandma with Nanny Regan. My father's sister unexpectedly visited Nanny at the same time with her 4-year-old daughter, who was recovering from whooping cough. A few days later, I came down with whooping cough, which was a very serious illness in those days. It was so serious that you put a child into hospital because of it. A few days later, my father blamed his sister and said he never wanted to see her again. After this, I met my aunt and her daughter twice in my life. The first time was at my father's funeral. The second was at my mother's funeral. This has been a great problem for Nanny Fox, for she could never invite the families of both her son and daughter at Easter and Christmas, when we all gathered at her house for dinner. Dad also carried a grudge against our next door neighbor, who we used to call Auntie Kath. He didn't speak to her for decades and also forbade us to speak to her. I have no idea what the reason was. Even my mother had forgotten. Sometimes we children, as we were going into our house, we would sneak a wave to her. If you have never held a grudge, do you at least know someone who has deliberately stopped speaking to someone else for some reason? When a former First Lady, Nancy Regan, was asked in an interview about her daughter Patty, her eyes filled with tears, and she spoke of the pain of estrangement from her daughter. This is such a common experience all over the world that there are novels and short stories and newspaper articles written about it. There are many stories of such estrangement in the Bible, especially in the section that many of us know as the Old Testament, and that nowadays we call the Hebrew Bible, to be more politically correct. There are many stories about forgiveness because holding grudges is what is called part of the human condition. The Jewish religion has at its core an emphasis on being whole with God and in human relationships. The Hebrew New Year practice, and I know that you know this, and we did spend some time talking about exactly this, being whole. Their practice of Yom Kippur that takes place around the beginning of October this year is one that encourages apology or atonement or at-one-ment, and forgiveness towards those who are harmed by our actions. In spite of this emphasis on forgiveness, rabbis will tell you that dozens of people come to them yearning to have resolved the pain and torment of estrangement from a child or a brother, a sister, or a congregation member. Rabbi Charles Klein relates many of these stories in his book, How to Forgive When You Can't Forget. There is a saying, it is easier to forgive an enemy than a friend. The closer we are, the harder it is to forgive. So what is forgiveness? One source says, forgiveness is typically defined as the process of ceasing to feel resentment or anger for a perceived offense, and ceasing to demand punishment or restitution. That was from Wikipedia, by the way. That was pretty good. Perhaps you've heard the story of the preacher who one morning asked the congregation, "How many of you have forgiven your enemies?" And about half the congregation held up their hands. He then repeated his question, "How many of you have forgiven your enemies?" This time everyone, except a very elderly lady, held up their hands. The preacher said, "Mrs. Jones, are you not willing to forgive your enemies?" "I don't have any," she replied. "I outlived them all." Beginning the forgiveness process is as simple as saying, "I'm sorry," to another. The offended person may go on to talk about how it was for them, and they may listen carefully to one another and exchange perspectives. They may actually use the words, "I forgive you." But there are many ways to forgive. In this morning's story, the parable of the prodigal son, we heard the son say he was sorry, and the father kissed him. This was the kiss of forgiveness. A hug and a kiss can do it all. While this is a good model for us all, forgiveness can be complicated, especially when more people are involved. On the subject of it's easier to forgive your enemies that are far away, or a lot of them, than it is for one in your own family. I'm mindful of, I grew up in the shadow of World War II. And I remember being shocked when, I think I must have been about 21, 22, I went back to visit my parents in England, and my father had a German car. I never thought that would happen. I didn't. And I think that's an example. It's easier to forgive for our Vietnam veterans to forgive, the people in that country, than it is to forgive your brother who said bad things about you. Yeah. Scholars often say that the parable of the prodigal son should have been called the parable of two sons and their father. Perhaps you know that this fabulous old story in its ancient version in the Bible is mostly told in dialogue between the characters or the interior thoughts of the son. When you read your Bible, notice that. I mean, they employ these wonderful dramatic devices. We actually hear the awareness growing within the young man. He's sorry. He actually says he's sorry. He's very sorry. If a Jewish person were to hear this story, and don't forget Jesus was a Jew, he would know that he should listen very carefully. So Jews would listen to this story because The fact that a father divides up his property before his death is completely opposite to custom and even opposite to what is advised in the Bible. So they would be on the alert. So Jesus was very clever this way. He would know, they would listen very carefully to something that's opposite to what they've been taught. Toward the end of the story, we find that the other son is annoyed at the easy forgiveness, especially when he had been so blameless. We are left at the end wondering whether the stay-at-home son will continue to carry a grudge against the father and perhaps against his brother as well. I strongly suspect he will. How we react to the situations of our lives is a choice. We can choose to hold a grudge. We can choose to let it go. It is much easier to let it go if we have received an apology in some way, and we might first determine whether the person who has harmed us knows they have harmed us. Now, some people take offense, and then that person who gave the offense may not know anything about that you were offended. If the person doesn't know he or she has offended us, we would have to decide whether we should tell him or her. We can choose to forgive when we are in a place of readiness to do so. You might forgive mentally, and the person may know nothing about how you suffered. You have to decide. You want to let them know that this is what they said and you suffered because of it, and they have no, if you've got children, this may have happened to you. It happened to me. But I immediately saw the suffering and I said I was sorry. All the world's religions counsel us not to hold a grudge. In Islam, the Quran makes it clear that whenever it is possible, it is better to forgive another than to attack another. The Quran describes the believers as those who, when angered, they forgive. Hinduism counsels forgiveness as a way of growing the soul and resolving life's lessons. How about that? That really speaks to me. So if you're holding a grudge, you're growing your soul by forgiving. Buddhism counsels simply to not be attached to holding grudges and to see the oneness in us all. They advise practicing loving kindness or metta towards all beings. I will tell you that some psychologists have called this the tyranny of oneness. They say that forgiveness without change is dysfunctional and rewards misbehavior. And that sent me to some of the Buddhist teachings. And what I see is that if you have harmed someone, they put it into the way of being kind to that person. They don't say, apologize. They say, be kind to that person. Personally, I like the explicit apology. I believe that true understanding, which requires deep listening, must be there, at least on the part of one person. I also believe that some people are simply too limited to have the capacity to forgive without good counseling. Therefore, it is better for the one who has the capacity to forgive and do it verbally for his or her own good. It can be not done also in a letter or as a prayer or some other form of letting go. Because when someone has forgiven you, now you have to let go of that resentment. Good health and happiness require us to let go of our grudges. That is a good line in the Lord's Prayer that says, we should say that sometimes. Do you say that? By the way, there's a wonderful UU version of that prayer. It's the actual prayer and then a response to each line. And this line, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Trespass means simply an offense of some kind. This is so obviously a Jewish prayer, reminding us that Adonai always forgives. Rabbi Klein spends much of his ministry with people who desperately want to reconcile, usually with family members, but sometimes with friends. I do so hope you will take the time at the beginning, almost the beginning of this year, to do an inventory of your life in the year just past, or at other times in your life, if it's something that rankles with you still, and just check whether or not an apology is due. But on the level of our interpersonal relationships, it is well known that people who do not hold grudges are healthier and happier than those who do. But what do you do when you want to say you're sorry or ask for forgiveness and the other person cuts you out of his or her life, like my father? Experts Sydney and Suzanne Simon tell us that being sorry and being ready to forgive is a byproduct of ongoing healing and a sign of positive self-esteem and maturity. It is letting go of the intense emotions attached to incidents from the past and recognizing that we no longer need our grudges and resentments, hatred and self-pity. Experts are also agreed that forgetting is not necessary in order to forgive. That's an important thing. You don't have to forget. You probably won't forget. And it's unrealistic to expect that. Forgive and forget is unreasonable, and we should forget it. In a nutshell, forgiving is about letting go the power that a grudge has over us, and this allows us to move on and become our best selves. As we have said, forgiving can also be a bit complex. What if someone comes and tells you how much they have suffered for what they have done or said, and you had no intention whatever of causing such hurt? This is the one that you might have with your children. It might not be helpful to the other person if you respond, I'm sorry that you interpreted it that way. Some people would say that. I've heard people say, I'm sorry you interpreted it that way. This might seem to make light of his or her suffering and diminish his or her effort to you about talking about it. It might be better to make a quick assessment to see whether the other person is open to talking about it. If you see suffering before you and you are saying you are sorry will relieve this suffering without causing you any harm, then you might decide to say you're sorry anyway. That's what I did with my son. There may be a time in the future when you can talk more openly. Who is right is of little consequence when the self-esteem of a loved one is at stake. You might have guessed, yes, that I have had this experience. It's clearly common for another person to be entirely unaware of how another person experienced a remark or a behavior, and therefore I offer you these experiences of mine. This is a good topic to ponder deeply. You will see all around you people suffering from real or perceived hurts, wanting to reconcile with others and being denied. I recall logging onto AOL one morning and immediately saw an article about the anguish experienced by the actor Jean-Claude Van Damme over the estrangement of his 13-year-old son. You've heard the saying, it is to err is human, to forgive divine. Isn't this why we are here, to claim and practice our divinity? Yes, of course it is. At least we could practice apologizing and forgiving amongst ourselves. And don't all rush. And then it will be easier to practice it in our families and in the world. Let us lessen our sorrows by talking about them and by offering a listening ear. I offer mine to you if you want it. Thank you for listening today. It is time for our offertory for the support and the work of this community. Let the offering be received. Are there any joys or concerns that you would like to share?
So I just have an update about my sister-in-law, Gail. It's not good news. She's still in the hospital, and she will come home at some point, but the diagnosis is some very complex name for this brain tumor, and it's not treatable and it's not curable. And they've given her 6 months. So she will come home, she'll have care at home, and the way the doctor described it, she will die the same way my sister did. You know, they'll give her pain for medication for the pain, and she'll just slowly stop eating and sleep more, and then that will be it. So it's going to be a tough couple of months, and if you pray for me.
So I apologize, that was my phone. I turned it off and I thought, I'm so sorry. But I do have a joy. We have a beautiful Paul Revere bed. And Justin mentioned to me recently, because he remembers as a child being here, that he and Allison and the other kids who were here, your children as well, would occasionally ring the bell. Well, not occasionally, every Sunday would ring the bell. So I'm just putting it out there as I don't know, a notification to all of us. Maybe you should stop ringing that bell again. So, thank you. Right, there you are.
So, round two. I forgot to mention that our event tomorrow evening, we invited Bethel AME Church congregation to be our guests. So hopefully our very white congregation will be somewhat black and white tomorrow night. And that's a joy Also, a joy is that I first entered this, not this building, the older building, on the weekend when Martin Luther King was assassinated. There was a march from the library, just 5 or 6 blocks from here, to our old church, and I joined that march and entered the church when Bruno Visco was here. And so I was 20-something at the time. And I reflect on that because I was at Sweet Rose Cafe this morning, picking up my coffee. And by the way, they're donating whatever pastries they don't sell today to our event tomorrow. So we'll have lots of Sweet Rose Cafe sweets tomorrow. But there was a young woman, no doubt in her 20s, and I invited her, and I invited the other baristas to join us, and to also go to breakfast for the Bethel Church. And this young woman, Liz, is her name, said, "Will your church baptize me? Will we? I want to be with God," she said. And I said, "Well, the Unitarian is sort of more about the search rather than the destination, but certainly we would love to have you come." And she said, "Well, give me the number." So I will drop by at 3:30 today when they close, pick up the pastries, and I'll give her one of our brochures, our service today, so that she has information to come and join us. But it made me think about, and this is the concern, is that I think Donald at 60 plus, anybody else under 60?
Under 60.
Yeah. So I think that that's our youth contingent. So 60 plus is our youth contingent. So I guess I want to challenge our standing committee to think about, can we do a youth outreach event, something that might be combined with a Sunday service, maybe it's a special event, something that would challenge all of us to bring a youth, one of those 20-something-year-olds or something like that, more or less, to that service, and in hopes of maybe 2025 being the year that we integrate with some youth. So that's my concern, but my joy is that it's been since the 60s that I've been a member of this church, which I think, or an attendee, because I didn't join until later, but it's been a good journey, and it's joyful that I have this place to be on Sundays, because it's very important.
I have a joy and a very big joy. We all know that the weather's gonna change in the 0 degrees this week. I survived some of those cold months, but I just wanna say, Steve, I appreciate everything you've done for me to get me out of the cold. Being homeless was no good thing for me. And now that I'm able to get my life back together, with my health issues and doctors, I fear that this week is gonna be a deadly week because of all the people that are gonna be out there homeless, trying to deal with that 0-degree windshield and so on and so forth. But I am blessed to have a friend like you to give me a place to live. And I'm so happy you put it. Thank you.
Steve, we do have a younger person here, Robert.
Oh, yes, Robert, yeah.
Robert is what, he's in his 30s.
He's our new youth leader.
Is he 30 already? Is he 30 already? He's in his 30s, same age as my granddaughter. I didn't know he's Schoolsville, so he's, I'm going to 30-something.
Yeah, I just have a comment on the sermon. You know, on reflection, making Martin Luther King Day, right? It's I wonder the process. Now, forgiveness is like a really important subject in recovery. It's important like in all aspects of life. When someone is harmed to the point that they can't get their life back at all, like it's catastrophic harm, I've always struggled with how does that individual forgive? Like, that's, especially if the person or system or of oppression, like in this, in this instance, we're trying to bring that up. How do you forgive that if the system doesn't change? It's I know it's a personal journey and it's something I guess you have to let go just for your own benefit, right? But it seems like it's sort of like that comment that you made, that little tiny comment on the side. You said, well, if you don't address it, then you're basically like supporting bad behavior, right? And that's like such a, that's such a difficult thing. I know it comes up in recovery, because people in recovery a lot have been traumatically harmed to the point that they can't really recover their life back. And the people in the systems that cause the harm have like, could care less, about the harm they did. And this, that goes all the way to the top, obviously, but it is a fascinating
Right.
idea,
Complicated.
is how do you make restitution? And then when you realize it as an oppressor, let's say, how do you make restitution that's sufficient when you destroyed, people's lives? We think of the Gaza thing. It's like, I mean, there are a lot of innocent people that, unfortunately, that have been just destroyed by this conflict, which is sad, really, really sad. Anyway, yeah, that's.
Thank you. So let us join together, stand as you're able and willing, and sing our final hymn, 187, It Sounds Along the Ages. The closing words are from our hymnal by Theodore Parker. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love, its profession of faith, divine living. So may it be.